record. So welcome everyone to the second PSG and PGSG Immigration Attorney General Information Session for the fall of 2021. As a reminder, this initiative was developed to increase access to immigration legal services by offering monthly virtual services free to both undergraduate and graduate students at Purdue. Additionally, this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Purdue Student Government's YouTube page so you all can reference it at a later date. This is a joint initiative of Purdue Graduate Student Government and Purdue Student Government, and we'd like to give a special thank you to the Student Legal Services Office, the International Students and Scholars Office, the Burton D. Morgan Center for Entrepreneurship, and of course, the folks at Green and Spiegel for working with us, and of course, Jonathan for being here this evening. For those who don't know me, my name is Olivia Wyrick. I'm the Vice President of Purdue Student Government. I'm currently a junior studying political science and natural resources and environmental science. This evening on the call, we also have our President of Purdue Student Government, Shannon Kang. She's a senior in political science with minors in statistics and Spanish, and will be taking notes for you all this evening. And you can hear in the back. And we'll send those out to you all so they can be a reference point for you as well. I'd like to introduce our attorney this evening, Jonathan Grode, graduated from Temple University Beasley School of Law in 2008. Jonathan serves as the U.S. Practice Director and Managing Partner for the firm, and Jonathan has worked continuously in the U.S. business immigration law field since 1999 and has amassed considerable experience obtaining non-immigrant and immigrant visas for new company startups, professional workers, artists and entrepreneurs, athletes, physicians, and scientific researchers. Welcome, Jonathan and everyone here tonight. And we look forward to helping you guys really tackle some of your immigration questions and concerns. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jonathan.
All right, thank you so much. I am sorry about the confusion and being a little bit tardy this evening, but we are here together now. We have a nice small group. So guys, don't be shy about asking questions. And I will do my best to monitor the chat, or if you want to like raise your hand and come off of mute, we can do it that way. But I'm going to go through the questions that were asked in order. Some of the questions I can answer, but are better served by asking your International Student and Scholars Office. One of the things I love about working with Purdue is you have awesome resources on campus. And you know, in addition to this initiative by the student government, the faculty and staff that deal with visas are very well versed and knowledgeable, and you know, you should take advantage of that. Okay, so Jonathan, I heard that there's a bill to facilitate green card acquisition after 5 years of living in the United States. Could you talk about that? Are the chances of this bill getting enacted? Well, that's a problem with bills, you know. They get put out there for a variety of reasons, but typically they don't really go anywhere or muster much support. You know, and we've seen this with immigration. On day one of the Biden administration, they put a bill through to Congress to overhaul the entire immigration system. Part and parcel with that is this provision about permanent residency. That has gotten no traction within Congress. So I don't think we are going to see comprehensive immigration reform, unfortunately. I think right now the government is preoccupied with the pandemic, the infrastructure bill, and obviously what's going on with the Afghanistan situation. So chances of there being something comprehensive on immigration is probably pretty slim at this juncture, at least for 2021. Maybe we'll see something in 2022. I would love to see something for DACA recipients, them be provided a pathway to status and citizenship. But again, it is a very challenging political environment for immigration reform at the moment. So I would be mindful of that. So the next question is a summary overview of what international students need to get a job in the United States. Well, that is not so much an immigration question, but more like a career planning and placement type of question. What I can tell you is that be mindful of a couple of things when you do look for jobs. You know, ultimately, you're going to need a company to sponsor you for a visa, most likely the H-1B visa, in some instances the O-1. And the H-1B is your sort of standard working visa predicated on whether or not you have a position that requires a degree in a specific field of endeavor, and you have an educational background that matches that field of endeavor. It's a pretty easy legal standard, but there's quotas, there's numerical limitations, there's financial obligations that the employer must adhere to. The O1, on the other hand, is very common for our Purdue people getting PhDs or doing postdoc studies and that kind of thing. That is more based on your ability as opposed to a set standard. And there's no quota for O1s, but you really have to be quite prolific in terms of like publications or your notoriety within the field. So what kind of advice can we give? Well, I mean, the reality is that a lot of people are very cagey about asking employers for sponsorship. A lot of times people are like, listen, if I bring up the visa thing, they're not going to want to hire me. So I'm not going to say anything. And then hopefully someday down the road, I'll get a good moment and I'll ask them if they'll sponsor me. I'm not really in favor of that approach. I think it's best to know where you stand. I think it's best to bring it up, not the first thing, not like, hi, my name is Jonathan and I need you to sponsor me for a visa first thing. But, I think it's something that should be brought up in that initial conversation. And what's interesting about today is that the hiring market is super, super, super in favor of workers. There is a lack of available workers. So employers are much more willing to entertain the idea of visa sponsorship than they have been in the past, just because of the effects that we're seeing on the labor market. Use that to your advantage. Don't be afraid to bring up that you need a visa, that you require sponsorship, because getting out ahead of it, making sure that you have plenty of time left in your OPT if you need to find another job because this company's unwilling to sponsor you, will only help you. So, my overarching advice for this question is, I can't tell you how to get a job. That's you. But what I can tell you is that in order for companies to sponsor you, in order to receive that sponsorship, it's best to disclose that you need assistance. Okay. All right. Next question. I want to file for a change of status from F1 to F2 for my wife. What happens to my wife's STEM OPT and grace period, and if the grace period ends before the petition is approved? All right, so when you're filing to change from like something like F1 to F2, or F1 to a visitor, or F1 to J1, these are all visa classifications that don't have employment authorization inherently associated with it. So the form you use is I-539. I-539, that allows you to change non-immigrant status that does not have an employment component with it as a de facto aspect of the classification. If you're changing from F1 to H1B, or F1 to O1, or if you have an H1B and you're moving to another H1B before, we use form I-129. Now, importantly, be mindful of the fact that as soon as you file that application to change status, as soon as that 539 application is received by the government, assuming it's properly submitted, you are allowed to remain in the United States, and you are in status whilst it's pending. You're allowed to remain in the United States and you are deemed to be in status whilst it's pending. In this particular instance, because the STEM OPT expires on October 10th, you can ride that out. You can actually set the start date on the change of status to be the day after it runs out. So you don't necessarily need to be concerned with grace periods. You can really roll off of the fact that if you have a timely filed application to change or extend your non-immigrant status, the mere filing of it and receiving a receipt is evidence of your ongoing lawful presence in the United States. I know that can be a little bit confusing, so are there any questions on that?
Hey, Jonathan, this is Sayan. I was the one who actually asked that question.
Okay.
So I guess the follow-up question that I have is that if you say it's filed, does it mean that it has been received and has a case number? That's when you call it filed?
That's what I utilize, because that's how you know that it's been properly lodged. Because you don't really have this, technically you have the status upon the filing, but until you get the receipt notice, you don't know that it was properly submitted.
Okay. And at what point can we, I know that while it's in process, we are not allowed to go outside of the US. But once the process is completed and the new F2 visa has been issued, after that, are we allowed, is it like normal, we can go out and come in as normal, or is it like once we go out of the US, even after that, we have to apply for an F2 visa in our home country?
Yeah, once you go out, you need a visa in order to re-enter. So you
Okay,
would
so it's
definitely need to get that from your home country.
okay.
Great questions. Any other follow-ups?
I have a question, but I don't know if it's related to this follow-up. It's also about a pending adjustment of status, but through marriage. Will the person, if you submit like a temporary job work permit through marriage, will I still retain F1 status and be able to apply for OPT work authorization?
So if you are in the green card process, you should not and cannot file for an OPT through employment. You should utilize the EAD application that you are entitled to as an applicant for adjustment of status. Like, you don't want to do that, Judy, because the F1 is a non-immigrant intent visa, meaning you can't have the intent to remain permanently. When you file for permanent residency, you're saying, I don't have the intent to be a student. So you don't want to like double up on applications by submitting something pursuant to a non-immigrant visa when you have a green card application in process.
Okay. So, oh, yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Okay. Good question. All right. Next question from the pre-populated questions. Does filing for earned income tax credit affect future H-1B visas? No, that's not considered to be a public charge. So you don't really have to be concerned about that per se. You know, I am not a tax expert, so you would have to talk about eligibility with an accountant, but I don't see, I don't see that being an issue per se for you. Any follow-up questions on that particular question? Who asked the tax question? Okay, great. All right, next question. How can international students start a startup? Whoa, that's like, I could talk about that for like 6 days. It's a little bit of a loaded question. I mean, there's a lot of different nuances there. The bottom line is it depends on nationality. You know, some nationalities are better suited for investment types of visas. Most European countries have a visa and accessibility to something called E2, Western countries. But for Indian nationals, Chinese nationals, Russian nationals, they don't have access to that visa. Fortunately, the Obama administration has created a program called Entrepreneur in Residence. It was canceled by Trump and then reinstated by Biden. And more or less what that says is if you have a startup and you have qualified investors and the investment amount exceeds $200,000 from a US source, you can get a visa that's valid for 3 years and renewable for an additional 3 years to direct and develop your startup enterprise. This is brand new. There's not a lot of case law on this. In fact, there's none to the best of my knowledge. But it is a valuable tool for those that don't have access to that E2 startup visa. You can do it under O1 classification if you're doing it based off of the technology that you've developed that's led to like peer review publications. But the bottom line is it's not easy. It's doable if you're pragmatic about it. And there are options now for all nationalities, but it's predicated on some pretty significant benchmarks being reached. And because of that, you know, if you are trying to be entrepreneurial and you want to start your own business, the best time to really do it is while you're on OPT. An OPT is that grant of employment authorization after graduation where you're allowed to engage in any activity as long as it's related to your major field of study. And with the O1, especially if you're from India, China, Russia, Brazil, those main countries that don't have access to the E2, while you're on your OPT, you can lay the groundwork and get the financial funding necessary in order to obtain that special entrepreneur in residence visa. You also, if you hit the ground running pretty heavily and you have a PR machine and you can get out in front of the press and talk about your products and development, you can utilize that sort of fame or notoriety in order to support doing an O1 down the road. One of the things that we do offer through these sessions are free consultations with the firm, where you can talk about anything you want. And if you are an individual looking to specifically engage in startup activities, that would be a great opportunity to use that service provided by the firm as a courtesy to the student government. Any questions or specific questions about that? I know it's a little bit tricky. I'm doing a hell of a job. Nobody has follow-up questions, so that's good. All right. Great. Next question. I am on L2. Will I be able to do a summer internship? You can, but it would be unpaid. Only F1s can get those CPT credits, can change over to be allowed to work pursuant to something that's related to their major field of study. L2 is a fine derivative status, but it doesn't carry inherent authorization to work. Now, if you have applied for the work authorization that L2 visa holders are allowed to obtain, then you can do an internship and be paid. And I would recommend, if you are thinking about doing that for next summer and you are in valid E2, L2 status or E2, go ahead and get that application in now, because they're taking a very, very, very long time to adjudicate. So the answer to that one is yes, you will be able to do the summer internship and getting paid. It sort of depends. It's a lot easier for somebody holding an F1 to do an internship, assuming the school is okay with it, because they just have to annotate Form I-20 stating that you're doing a CPT, and then you would be authorized to work. The next question is, I am a 2020 selectee for the diversity visa lottery. They applied and Purdue and F1. You can do adjustment of status from within the United States off of an F1, but you have to be very careful because there's an intent mix match. So essentially you have a situation where you have F1, which is the intent not to remain permanently in the US. And then as soon as you start going down the green card process, you're displaying immigrant intent. You have to be very mindful of that. So for this person asking about the diversity visa lottery, that would be a good situation where you might want to have a consultation to talk about your specific scenarios in more detail. But the diversity lottery is something that's been extremely challenging in this particular environment. The reason being that the embassies and consulates are ostensibly closed. There's a lot of unused numbers, unfortunately. So if you are in the US and you are in valid status, consider doing the adjustment of status. Next question. I have had a J2 visa from several years ago, and I'm concerned about the 2-year residency requirement, which I do. I would need to know the basis for which you got the J visa, or the J2, or your spouse got the J1 in this particular instance. And then you would have to see if you can get a waiver. Just because a lot of time has passed doesn't mean the obligation goes away. When you have a J1 with a 2-year home residency requirement, it literally means go home for 2 years. Now, you can, like I said, get a waiver in certain instances, but it depends on how the program for which you obtained the J1, J2 originally was funded. If you were getting a lot of money from a government as opposed to self-funding, it's much harder to get the waiver because there is this investment in this concept of exchange. I bet you didn't know this, but the Peace Corps and this program were formed around the same time. And the Peace Corps sends Americans outside the United States to add to culture, experience, and that kind of thing. Whereas the J1 brings individuals in so they can experience the culture. So at its very root and foundation, the idea behind the visa is that you're going to be able to take the skills you learn and allow you to benefit you when you go to your home country. That's why the waiver is necessary. Any questions about the 2-year home residency requirement? Could I explain more about the I-539 and when it's useful? Okay. So the 539 is useful if you're changing from one non-immigrant status to another, as long as the status that you're changing into does not have an inherent right to work. So really F1 to J1, F1 to O1, F1 to maybe transferring to another school where there's been a gap. those are the kind of things that you need to be mindful of when thinking about a 539. There's another question that just came in about STEM extensions. And STEM extensions are when you have an H-1B visa and you've gotten a degree in a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, or math, and your employer is enrolled in E-Verify, which is like a document checking kind of system. This question says, my program is STEM, but my school has a non-STEM CIP code. Recently, that changed to a STEM CIP code. Would you advise that I talk to my school about reclassifying my degree so I can agree with STEM CIP and avoid officer discretion? Okay, so essentially what they're saying is like my position or my degree and background may qualify for the exemption into the numerical limitation, or sorry, may qualify for an extension of the STEM OPT, but really in this particular instance, you have to work with the school. Reclassifying your degree is possible, but I don't know if the school would allow you to do that. So great question. Unfortunately, no easy answer because it's so heavily dictated by the university. Another question that says, can I use I-539 to replace my F1 visa? When you file a 539, you are not getting a visa. You are extending your status or you're changing your status, but you're not getting a visa in and of itself. So that hopefully helps answer that question. It's a mechanism to help you extend your status or change your status. Visas can only be obtained from the embassy or consulates abroad. Okay, next question. What is the roadmap to go from OPT to green card? Well, I can tell you guys are engineers because you want to know about roadmaps. So that's good. But the short of it is that you get your OPT. Most people will change into a non-immigrant status like H-1B or O-1. And then you can go from there to permanent residency. Most types of green cards require some employer sponsorship. However, it is not actually a necessity for all types of green cards. Again, this might be one of those situations where signing up for a consultation could be very beneficial to you because we could go through your specific situation. And the final question that I received for the pre-questions is, can I graduate while on F1 reinstatement status? The answer should be yes, but again, this is a question that might be better suited for the International Student and Scholars Office. And that's all the questions that we received in advance. Does anybody have any other questions while we're here in our session today?
I think we have a hand raised as well.
Oh, Cheyenne, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's fine. Actually, I have a couple of questions, but I'll just ask one, and if anyone else doesn't have a question, I'll come back to the second one.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Just getting something. Go ahead. What's your question?
Sure. So it was again related to the change of status from F1 to F2. And I'm wondering that because my wife, like, if she leaves the country, she'll have to go for a new visa either way.
Right.
Is it better to just go to India and get F2 from there itself? Like, do you know what the current status is related to issuing F2 visas for people in India when the F1 is already in US? Like, I know F1 have a national interest exemption or something, but
F2 should as well because they're considered students. So that should be okay. India is a tricky place right now, Ian.
Yeah.
What part of India are you from?
It's the eastern side. So it's
Calcutta?
Yeah, close to that.
Not bad. Okay. It's tricky. You should be able to get that visa process, but as soon as you leave the country, you're opening yourself up to problems. There's a lot of delays in India and visa processing right now, a lot, because of the pandemic pushing everything back. Getting those national interest exceptions and being able to travel can be quite challenging. So, it is not the easiest scenario to address, but certainly they should qualify for the exemption if you do have a need to travel back for a specific purpose. I don't want to stand in your way, but if I had my druthers about it, you wouldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's a specific reason to travel immediately. I was just wondering, like, an F2 would be there for like a few good years. So there is no like problem when I'm traveling in the future. Whereas if I do it from within the US, is the first time I leave US for whatever reason, I'll have to make sure that she gets an F2 before we can come back.
But some maybe Mexico will open up and you can process there and have visa in hand. There's a lot of things that can change between now and then. So, good question though.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, just got a good one. All right. Kalash. Currently on an H4 visa and I'm waiting for a green card in the EB2 category. When I turn 21, I will age out and receive a new priority date, and I'll have to switch to F1 as well. Is there any legislation regarding this matter in Congress? And if so, what are the chances of it passing? Oh, so numerical limitations for Indian nationals as it pertains to permanent residency have been a problem for decades. And it's particularly acute now. But I guess my question, Kailash, is what is your basis of the EB2? Can you maybe unmute yourself?
Could you please repeat the question? I wasn't
What was
able
the
to
basis?
hear it.
What was the basis of your EB2?
I'm getting it through my parents.
So it's not EB. Oh,
Yeah, but I get that, like, it's not under EB2, but that's what my father applied under. So
so you're a derivative. Yeah. So
yeah,
you would fall. When do you turn 21?
June 2024.
Oh, you got a little bit of time. You might be protected under the Child Status Protection Act, which would allow you to continue the green card process, but I wouldn't know without looking at your specific situation. But I don't see any legislation in Congress. It almost happened last summer where they pushed the way that people were counted against the numerical limitations for green cards. That's what you're referring to. That's only of retrogression. That change in tenure and posture has made things a little bit more complicated, but ultimately you would have to look at your very specific situation to see. And hopefully, Kailash, what we'll see happen in the near future is like kind of what we were talking about is a loosening of the bill. The one thing, Kailash, that could really be beneficial to you is the pandemic, actually. And this is where things kind of run the other way to your advantage, because so many people haven't been able to get their green cards issued abroad. They're creating additional numbers. And I would keep a very close eye on that October visa bulletin, because we do expect a lot of traction with the wait times, particularly for Indian nationals. And that should be coming out any day. So, your situation is a little bit unique because you're relying on your parents, but I think you have a decent chance of getting it, regardless of what Congress does. The next question was, do you know if Canada is processing F1 renewals? So Canada just opened up to third country nationals if they were double vaccinated yesterday, and the wait times are pretty low. I can actually take a quick look here. So for example, if you're a student and you're applying in Ottawa, come on. They're taking a long time. They're 120 days. Toronto is extremely backed up, 180 days. Vancouver is 41 days. So, I mean, it is possible to do it up in Canada. You just got to be mindful of where you end up going and where you book. Any other questions?
I think
stay more than 30 days. Melinda, stay more than 30 days where? Well, it depends on your nationality and if you have a visitor visa or eligibility, but you can't stay more than 30 days if you want to be able to re-enter without getting a new visa. That's called automatic revalidation. or trips to Canada or Mexico for 30 days or less do not impact your process.
I believe Cyan had a question as well.
Sure.
So this is a separate topic basically. I am in my final year of my PhD and I will be going into OPT and then STEM OPT from January.
Okay.
I am in talks with a startup about a potential job.
Okay.
So, and they said that they are willing to do an H-1B for me, but again, we are right now in talks, there's nothing final. So I'm wondering, like, if I want to go for the whole green card and all those things, what should I be in the lookout for regarding the startup, if it's a good option for me to join or not?
Startups are tricky, just generally speaking. They can be very tricky because they might not be large enough to support a visa filing. Not saying it's impossible by any stretch of the imagination, but it can be a little bit tricky. So, you do have to be a little bit mindful of the size of the employer, how they present themselves, the nature of the industry, that kind of thing. So it is doable, but I would need to know a little bit more as to whether or not I thought it was a good place for you to sort of put your eggs, because it might not be the best basket.
Okay.
Okay, you can go first. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm guessing I should discuss this more in the free session instead of in the general session for my specific case.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, take advantage of the consultations, and you can talk about your specific scenario. We'll be happy to look at like a job description or explore a company with you.
Okay, so I have one last question. So I currently didn't I haven't applied for the I-485 yet. So would you recommend me to first go on with an OPT and decide that later? But you also said that, for example, when people were transferring to green cards, they need to first transfer to a non-immigrant H-1B and then go transfer to a green card. So would it be
that's ideal. It's not 100% necessary, but what's the basis of your green card filing?
The basis? So I don't know. It's yeah, currently I'm a Canadian. I have the option to get married with my fiance right now. And I also have an F1 status that I could apply for OPT. I think I'm in a similar situation as Cyan, where I'm graduating in 2022 and may get a job offer. So it's kind of a dilemma for me right now of what to do next, or what will be the best option for my scenario.
Book a consultation, Judy, and we can go through it with you. Typically speaking, the marriage route, if it's available, is the cheapest and easiest way to obtain permanent residency, but it might not be the best order of operation for your particular situation.
Yes, and also because of the COVID, the working permit could take way longer than prior, right? So yeah, I wouldn't be able to secure a job and tell them I could work at this date if I don't have other options to seek.
Right, but it's the same processing time as an OPT. So, if you get married before graduation, you can get started on the work hard sooner so that you have that ability to work sooner. So
yeah, that's
what I'm
also
saying. You should probably get a consultation just to make sure you're looking at it the right way.
Okay, so the consultation is through the
yeah, there's like a little sign-up sheet, and they can
I actually did one this morning, and she had contradictory viewpoints from you, so I'm kind of
Who's that? Did you talk to Emily?
She didn't say that. I forgot the name, but she says that currently I just need to have consent from Purdue's office that the OPT I could still apply for OPT even if I have a pending status. So that's why I asked this question.
You can, maybe there was some confusion there, but you should definitely not do that, in my opinion. I don't think there's a need to do it.
But if it's the vice versa, it will be fine, right? If I have OPT first, I
Correct.
start working, and then I apply for a green card. But correct. I can also just directly go get a green card and just give up my OPT.
Correct. You just hit the nail on the head.
Thank you so much.
I had an anonymous question sent in the chat to me as well. I could read it for you. The question is, if I get married with a U.S. citizen, what are the possibilities to be legal if they entered illegally? They'd never been involved with migration. They're always reporting their income tax, and they have no criminal record.
But the person entered with I'm a little confused. Who, the U.S. citizen entered without inspection, or the person that you're trying to file for?
The person trying to file for. So if they came illegally, but they have no record, they've pretty much done everything.
Yeah, so you need it depends how many times they entered the country illegally. And if it's just a single entry, you can do something called a 601 stateside waiver, where you explain the hardship that would befall the U.S. citizen if the person was removed from the United States. Not an easy process, but totally doable.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
How that all works. Thank you.
Cool. Well, this was cool. This was great. It's amazing how fast 45 minutes flies by. I like the smaller groups because we can answer specific questions.
Mm-hmm. Take
advantage of the resources that the university has for you, and I'm happy to help as well.
Yeah, and everyone can find the links to sign up for individual consultation. If you go to Purdue Student Government's Instagram page, we have a link tree in our bio, and it gives you all kinds of resources. And before everyone hops off, if they could fill out the Google form link that I just dropped in the chat for attendance, that would be lovely. Awesome. A word from President Kang.
Oh, it's on video. Oh my God, I didn't realize. Thanks for coming, everyone. I just walked over to see my participants.
Mon Capitan, adios. All right, we'll see you in a month, guys.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.